Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is lukemick, and today I just want to talk about some of my favorite movies of the decade that we can refer to as the tens. How should we pronounce this decade? I haven't really, paid attention to the way other people are saying it, but you say the 20s, the 30s, the 40s onwards, it really rolls off the tongue because there's that Y at the end, but just saying the tens doesn't sound very good. This isn't essentially going to be a top 10 video. These movies that I'm going to be putting on this video aren't going to be ranked. They aren't really in order. I'm just kind of talking about things that I know I really enjoyed in this past decade, and there's really no way to rank them because I just love all these movies so much. If you want to see my full 30 film ranked list, you can go to my Letterboxd, which is linked down below. Again, they're ranked, but it's not like that accurate. It's really hard to just rank fucking really good movies, you know what I mean? So let's get on with it with the first movie I want to talk about. What the Oh, hey. My name's Mick Luke, and fuck that Luke Mick guy. Just fuck him. I want to talk about my favorite movies. Who said he gets to talk about all the movies? Maybe I want to talk about something. No, I'm here. He's not. He doesn't know I'm here right now. I might as well hijack the Luke Mick show. Yeah, you know what? Let's do that. I got control right now. These are Mick Luke's favorite movies of the decade. Let's talk about my favorite movies of the decade. Wow! Nightcrawler is the kind of film that I can watch, honestly, anytime. To me, it is so perfectly plotted and paced, there is never a dull moment to me. Jake Gyllenhaal seriously delivered one of his, if not his best performances as Lou Bloom. The character of Lou Bloom is just so intelligent and calculated that you can believe almost anything that the guy says, and that's why I love this character, is because he's a sociopath psycho, but he's so interesting to watch and so funny at the same time. The concept of this film is also unlike anything that I've ever seen. It mostly takes place in LA at night, and it focuses on people whose job it is to film crime scene footage and sell it for money, of course, to local TV news stations. It's pretty fucked up, but I guess it's a real thing, and it's really interesting. I've always been someone who likes true crime. I really like the score, too. It uses a lot of common action news themes and melodies, and it obviously fits the subject matter very well. Nightcrawler is just one of my favorite films, period. It's fast-paced, incredibly acted, and gifts us with an unpredictable, pulse-pounding climax that you will not soon forget. Blade Runner 2049 really does the impossible by being a tonally and aesthetically faithful sequel to a film that came out almost 40 years ago. Denis Villeneuve and crew recreated the world of Blade Runner to a T for this film. Every design choice is inspiring. Hans Zimmer's score in a lot of ways lives up to the original film's score done by Vangelis. Ryan Gosling was perfectly cast as Kay, an incredibly astute replicant detective who's on the brink of a mental breakdown. Harrison Ford, of course, returned as Deckard and was granted a very sweet and satisfying conclusion to his story. And Ana de Armas's Joy was the perfect, ounce of humanity that the character of Kay could latch onto. To me, Blade Runner 2049 was just an incredible achievement and proof that you can recapture the magic of a cult classic from the past like Blade Runner, and also at the same time make a film that's able to stand strong on its own. Blade Runner 2049 is the best sequel of the decade in my opinion. If you have not watched either of the Blade Runner films,
get on it,
because they are worth your time. Director Yorgos Lanthimos made some giant waves in the indie filmosphere in the decade of the 10. He released 4 feature-length films, I believe, my favorite of them being The Killing of a Sacred Deer. This movie is pretty crazy. It evokes Kubrick in its shot composition and Twin Peaks in its out there, stilted dialogue. I really loved the theme of having a sort of cosmic balance and fairness to everything. The acting and writing in this film is just so bizarre. You wouldn't even be able to tell if somebody's giving a bad performance because everything about The Killing of a Sacred Deer is just so fucking weird. I love this film's dark sense of humor and its complete willingness to to go all in when it has to. The Killing of a Sacred Deer marks one of my very favorite films of the last decade. See? I can be professional if I have to. I can just give you guys my straight up opinions on things if I have to. Elle, directed by Paul Verhoeven, is another film that I'd like to mention real quick. When I went in to see the movie Elle, I knew nothing about it, and it shocked my senses, to say the very least. This is a scandalous, semi-erotic thriller that pulls no punches whatsoever. I don't want to say too much about Elle because I think it's best to go into it without having any idea of what you're getting into, but it's just so full of these rich and interesting characters and suspects. It really does present a really great mystery. The course of the story is definitely not one you're going to expect, and if you can get past some of the disturbing and potentially triggering subject matter, I think you'll really enjoy Elle quite a bit. So Luke Mick's got an erotic film on his list. Well, Mick Luke has an erotic film too. I want to discuss Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden. This film is breathtaking, from its unique storytelling to its beautiful set design and costume design. This is a period piece that bleeds with authenticity. You will definitely be thrown for some loops in this movie. It has a very unpredictable story. It's the kind of film that leaves the viewer with just the right amount of information going from scene to scene without giving too much away, and I think that it's done so well. That can be a very fine line. It's easy to cross sometimes. Park Chan-wook was able to walk it perfectly. The Handmaiden is truly a gripping film that explores the different aspects of love. It's quite the balancing act for director Park Chan-wook, but he guides this film with a deft hand. My favorite animated film of the decade would have to be Hayao Miyazaki's The Wind Rises. This film is very special for a few reasons. One, this film was supposed to mark the end of Hayao Miyazaki's career. He's since gone back on that comment, but that's not the point. The story of Jiro Horikoshi, the main character of The Wind Rises, his life just really nicely reflected the life and career of Hayao himself, and it just felt like the perfect conclusion for a filmmaker as legendary as he is. It also really felt like the end of an era when this film was coming out, because this kind of started the beginning of the end for Studio Ghibli as a filmmaking studio as well. And the release of this film was also a turning point for me because it came out right when I got my license and I had the ability to go to more art house and independent cinemas, which is where I saw this movie. So it really started this whole love I have for film. It really helped support that and reinforce that, and I really appreciate The Wind Rises for that. As for the film itself, Jiro is just such a kind and diligent person that you can't help but root for him and connect with him while watching this movie. He's just a wonder to watch. The animation is, of course, rich and illustrious, as should be expected with a film from Hayao Miyazaki. And this film also gave me a much different perspective into Japan's role and just their presence during the World Wars, a perspective I had never seen before. So I thought that was also a really cool thing about this film. And some of the sound design in this movie is it's really just funny and cute. Basically, all the machinery sounds sound like they're coming out of someone's mouth. Like, literally, all the planes sound like... I always thought that was a really nice touch. And it also made me cry the first time I saw it. So The Wind Rises certainly deserves to be my favorite animated film of the decade. If you haven't seen it, check it out, because it's on my list. It's one of my favorites, so that's why you should watch it. That's reason enough, isn't it?
Isn't it?
You ever seen Phantom Thread? Phantom Thread is just a gorgeous picture. There's no doubt about it. Paul Thomas Anderson is able to make a period piece about a revered London dressmaker that I consider to be one of my favorite films of the decade. Anything is possible when PTA is behind the camera. The character of Reynolds Woodcock is so well realized by Daniel Day-Lewis. He brings so much to this character, as he does with all the other characters he plays, but with Woodcock, you can just taste the jealousy seething from his pores. I love the character of Reynolds so much that I want to name my dog in the future after Reynolds. I want to name my dog Reynolds. I don't know when that will be, but I want to have a little dog and call him Reynolds. Or I could just name my kid Reynolds. Reynolds Woodcock Mickelson. How'd that sound? I listened to Johnny Greenwood's score endlessly after seeing Phantom Thread, and I continue to do so to this day. He's scored many PTA films before, but I think that this one is his best. Now, supposedly PTA was inspired to write this film based off of his marriage with his wife, Maya Rudolph, which I find to be quite interesting because the relationship between Reynolds and Alma in this film is problematic, but I guess if it works for him, then who am I to judge, right? The thing is, Phantom Thread just presents this devilishly precise and honestly grand story that underneath it all, at its core, is a twisted romantic comedy of sorts. This film is full of subtle humor, and it just never fails to make me all warm and cozy whenever I decide to watch it. I was not ready for Burning the night that I watched it. This is probably the most emotionally draining, frustrating, and depressing film that I've ever seen. It's the kind of film that's very patient and deliberate, and it really asks you to get involved with the story that it's trying to tell. I think what makes the film so engrossing is that we're with our main character Jong-soo for literally the entire time. We witness him do everything in this film. Any menial life tasks that he has to do, we see him do it. I don't think the camera ever loses sight of him. Everything in this film is presented through his eyes. So every assumption that he makes is what we see. We don't ever see another side to things. When watching this film, you're really in this character and in his experiences and experiencing what he's going through with him. And to me, it was just incredibly powerful, and it shook me to the core. And because of this way of telling the story, you see a really stark contrast between the events of the first half of this film and the second half. It has a very clever way of showing you the same thing twice, but with quite different perspectives from the same person. Lee Chang-dong's directing and writing just really was able to put me as the viewer into this film and make me feel like I was just as helpless as our main character, Jong-soo. It was quite the experience that this film put me through. Burning really just feeds into one of my biggest fears. And I'm not going to say what that is because, one, I don't want to tell you what my biggest fear is, and two, I might ruin the movie if I do that. Just know that it kept me up at night for like a week. I was just thinking so much about this film, and I hadn't thought that much about a movie in a long time. I'm glad that I randomly decided to finally watch it. I have Lee Chang-dong's Secret Sunshine on Criterion, but I've been hesitant to watch it because I'm just afraid that it's going to put me through the same amount of stress that this film put me through. Watch Burning. This was the kind of movie that really just put me in it. It's on Netflix, so if you have a chance to watch it, take that chance. I was 13 when Scott Pilgrim vs. the World came out in theaters, and I immediately fell in love with it. I had already enjoyed a lot of Edgar Wright's previous work, and this was probably my favorite. I saw it several times in theaters, decided to read the graphic novel series, bought the soundtrack, and played/beat the tie-in video game that came out when the movie did. Scott Pilgrim was just the perfect conglomeration of things that I knew and loved: video games, music, and movies. Like Nightcrawler, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a movie that I can watch anytime, anywhere. I've tried reading the books again semi-recently, and I just kind of stopped at the first one because, in all honesty, Scott just seems like kind of a dick in the books, at least for as far as I got in the beginning. Michael Cera just brings a lot more softness and vulnerability that is missing from the books. I think that his performance and the screenwriting for the film just makes Scott a much more likable character in general. So yes, I think Michael Cera did a perfect job of embodying Scott Pilgrim and making him a better person than he was in the books. And the supporting cast is honestly just unbelievable. I can't even list everyone because there are so many stars in this film. This is one of the best ensembles of all time, in my opinion, and every character in this film just feels so fresh and unique, and they're all so funny in their own different ways. And the movie to me is just so hilarious. It's so quick, it's so witty, it's just non-stop laughs throughout the entire movie. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World to me is just one of the most perfectly paced films that never lets up, and I'm always so bummed out by the time it's over because I want more of it. The fight scenes are all really interesting, exciting, and memorable, and the soundtrack fits the scenes that they're in very well. I've always loved the soundtrack for this film. The point is, I mean, I could say things and talk about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with y'all all day long, but the fact is, I'm not going to do that. If you haven't seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World yet for some reason, what are you doing? Do it right now. I'm talking to you. Yeah, you know. You're the one I'm talking to. I'm pointing right at you. You know who you are. Watch this movie. But seriously, it's one of my all-time very favorite films, not even of just the past decade, but of all time. I love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It means a lot to me, and it's a great film. Check it out. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. I don't think lukemick, he might not ever be coming back after this.
Hey! Get away from me!
God. Who was that guy? Is he bothering all of you? I literally just went upstairs to get an apple, and I come down and see him in front of my camera and everything. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed my list, or you have your own opinion on my favorite movies, or you want to tell me what some of your favorites are, please do so down in the comments. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. I'm always making content kind of like this and whatnot, so if you enjoyed this, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed and continued watching, because I've got more videos planned that I'm excited to make and excited to share with you all. So thank you again for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.